I froze. The fork in my hand went still. 14 people at that table, and not one of them said a word. Diane smiled when she said it, like she'd been waiting years to finally let that out. What she didn't know, she had about 4 minutes before everything changed. My name is Tessa Beaumont. I'm 39 years old. And for most of my life, I believed my sister when she said things like that. I'm a licensed occupational therapist. I work with low-income pediatric patients, kids who have trouble with basic motor skills, sensory processing, daily life tasks that most people take for granted. It's not glamorous work. I don't drive a luxury car because of it. I don't get standing ovations at family dinners. But I show up every single day for children who need someone in their corner. And I have never once questioned whether it mattered. And I grew up in a mid-sized southern town. 2 parents, 1 house, 1 older sister who seemed to do everything right. Diane is 4 years older than me. She was the valedictorian. She married a man with a good last name. She bought a house before 30. At every family gathering, her name came with a warm glow attached to it. Mine came with a pause. I went through a quiet divorce at 35. I didn't make a scene about it. I just rebuilt, slowly, on my own terms. The family saw my silence and decided it meant I was broken. I let them think that. I was carrying something none of them knew about, and I was almost ready to stop hiding it. If you've ever been the one your family underestimated, or the one they talked about like you weren't even in the room, you already understand Tessa. Her story is not unique, but the way it ends, that part is. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been called a burden by someone who was supposed to love you? Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, because this story doesn't end the way Diane expected. And click like if you're already on Tessa's side. 2 weeks before that Thanksgiving dinner, our family gathered at Mom's house. She had passed 4 months earlier, and this wasn't a formal legal reading. It was just us, Dad, 2 aunts, and Diane's husband at the kitchen table, supposedly having a calm conversation about what Mom had left behind. Mom's house was paid off, a modest 3-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood, worth about $180,000. Nothing extravagant, but it was hers, and it smelled like her. That specific mix of cedar and sweet tea and the lavender sachets she kept in every drawer. Walking in still felt like walking into her arms. Diane arrived with a folder. She set it on the table like she was presenting a business proposal. Inside was a typed draft document she had already prepared herself, reassigning the house entirely to her name. Her justification was printed in clean, professional font. She had been the primary caregiver during Mom's final illness. She deserved compensation in the form of the property. She slid the paper toward me. "I figured you wouldn't mind," she said. "You were barely around, Tessa. We all know you were dealing with your situation." She let that last word hang in the air. Everyone at that table knew she meant the divorce. I felt the room shift. Dad stared at the table. One of my aunts gave a slow nod, like the logic made sense to her. Diane's husband leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, already relaxed because he assumed this was settled. Diane added, "Daddy, you know I handled everything. The hospital visits, the paperwork, the arrangements. Tessa sent cards." Her husband laughed quietly at that. I picked up the draft document. I folded it carefully. I put it in my purse. "I'll look it over," I said. Diane smirked. She thought she had won. The room thought I had surrendered. What Diane didn't know was that I had already spoken to someone, weeks before that meeting, and what I found out changed everything about that document, about that house, and about my sister. The weeks that followed were a slow unraveling, and I watched each piece fall with a strange, hollow calm. The first thing I noticed was the group chat. Our family had a sibling planning thread, just specifically put together to organize Dad's upcoming 75th birthday party. I went to send a message one morning and realized I couldn't. I had been removed. No explanation, no heads up. When I texted Diane directly and asked about it, her reply came back within minutes. "We just didn't think you'd want the stress, given everything." 4 words, given everything. That was her shorthand for my divorce, my quietness, my perceived fragility. She had dressed up exclusion as consideration, and she did it so smoothly I almost questioned myself for being bothered by it. I wasn't bothered for long. I was something else instead. Watchful. Then came Thanksgiving. 14 people at that table. Aunts, cousins, Diane's teenage kids, the whole production. The house smelled like roasting turkey and brown sugar yams. But a child was laughing at the far end of the table. Everything had the shape of warmth. Then Diane said it. "Honestly, Tessa has always been the burden of this family. Don't act like y'all don't know it." She wasn't provoked. No argument had led there. She said it the way someone says a thing they've been rehearsing, easy and clear, like she was just naming something everyone already agreed on. I felt heat move up my neck. My chest went completely still. Dad looked at his plate. No one spoke. Diane's husband made a small sound that wasn't quite a laugh but was close enough. It wasn't the first time she had done something like this, but something about it being in front of everyone made it feel final. Like she had decided, officially, that I had no standing in this family, that my presence was a problem she had learned to tolerate. I didn't respond. I picked up my fork, and I made a private decision that had nothing to do with that table. The third betrayal came from my father's own mouth, and it was the one I hadn't seen coming. I found out through a family lawyer that Diane had gone to our father privately. She told him she was concerned about my financial stability after the divorce. She told him I wasn't ready to handle money responsibly. Using that story, she convinced him to list her as the sole contact on a small joint savings account Mom had set up years ago for both of us. Dad told me himself, sitting across from me at the kitchen counter, his voice almost apologetic. "Diane said you weren't ready to handle money right now, sweetheart." He believed her. He believed her because she had been building that story for years, and I had been too quiet to contradict it. I stopped crying about it around that point. I started writing things down instead. Dates, texts, exact words. I created a folder on my phone and I filled it, calmly and methodically, with everything. What they didn't know was that my mother had told me something 3 months before she passed. Something she made me promise to keep quiet until the right moment. Mom was sharp until close to the end. She knew what was happening around her, and one afternoon, when it was just the two of us in her room, she handed me her phone and asked me to do something specific. She wanted to record a message, not a legal document, not a formal statement, just her voice, saying what she needed to say, to me, for safekeeping. She spoke for 11 minutes. I never played it for anyone. In that same visit, she handed me a sealed envelope from her personal files. Inside was a reimbursement form, a document Diane had apparently filed to claim compensation from the estate for her caregiving work. Over $14,000. The form carried Mom's signature. I recognized my mother's handwriting. I had seen it my whole life, on birthday cards, grocery lists, letters she mailed me when I moved away for school. The signature on that form was not hers. The letters were shaped differently. The pressure of the pen was wrong. It wasn't subtle once you knew to look. I quietly made copies of that document and sent them to a specific person. At the time, I didn't tell anyone who. Diane thought she had been so careful. She had managed the paperwork, managed the narrative, managed the family's entire perception of me. But she forgot one thing. She did all of it while I was watching. After the estate meeting, I reached out to Mr. Olin Briggs. He was a retired family attorney who had handled my parents' original wills decades ago. He wasn't flashy or dramatic. He was the kind of man who wore the same brown blazer to every meeting and spoke in complete sentences. He had been a quiet presence in our family's life for years, and something in my gut told me to call him. I brought him everything. The reimbursement form, the reassignment draft Diane had prepared, a copy of the original will Mom had filed years prior. He sat with each document for a long time, reading carefully, not saying much. Then he looked up. "Tessa, this signature doesn't match any document I have from your mother from the last 4 years. Someone should look at this carefully." That was all he said. But the way he said it steadied me in a way nothing else had. He wasn't a hero. He didn't promise to fix everything. He was just a steady voice confirming that I wasn't imagining things and that I had legal standing to act. That was enough. Diane, meanwhile, had decided the matter was closed. With the family quiet and Dad passive, she grew bolder. One morning, I was scrolling through a local real estate site, and I stopped cold. Mom's house was listed. Photos of the living room, the back porch, the kitchen with the yellow curtains Mom had sewn herself. Diane had hired an agent and put it on the market. She did not have my consent. She did not have legal authority to do it alone. My stomach dropped. Then I called Mr. Briggs. "She can list it," he told me. "She cannot sell it, not yet." "But we need to move." Diane was hosting the family's Christmas gathering at that same house in 2 weeks. She had invited everyone, framed it as a celebration. The house Mom had built her life in was about to become the backdrop for Diane's performance of ownership. I made my decision. The Christmas party. That was where it ended. The house was full when I arrived. 20 or more people, extended family, Diane's in-laws, cousins I hadn't seen in 2 years. Someone had hung a wreath on the front door. Christmas music played from a small speaker on the kitchen counter. The smell of pine and warm cider filled every room. Diane was in host mode, moving through the crowd with a glass of wine and a polished smile. When she saw me walk in, she crossed the room with open arms and a voice pitched just loud enough for the people nearby. "Oh, you actually came. I wasn't sure you would." I smiled. I wouldn't have missed it. I was carrying a folder. About 20 minutes later, Mr. Briggs arrived. I had asked him to come. He wore his brown blazer. He was quiet and unhurried, and he carried a formal letter from the probate court, filed that week, opening a legal review of the estate based on the forged reimbursement document. Diane saw him from across the room. Her smile didn't disappear. It flickered just for a second, like a light with a loose connection. She pulled me into the hallway. "What did you do?" Her voice was low and tight. "You had no right to go outside this family with this." "Mom left me something, Diane," I said. "Not just in the will." "On my phone. Do you want me to play it here, or do you want to talk somewhere private?" Her face changed completely. She knew about the recording. She had known Mom had said things toward the end that Diane wouldn't have wanted documented. She just hadn't known I had it. I didn't play it in the living room. I wasn't going to do that in front of her children or the elderly relatives sitting near the fireplace. That wasn't the point. I played it in a back bedroom, with Dad, Mr. Briggs, and 2 aunts present. We closed the door. Mom's voice came through my phone speaker, calm and clear and unmistakably hers. She talked about her wishes for the house. She talked about Tessa. She described specific things Diane had said and done in her final weeks, things that had troubled her, things she had not felt safe putting into a document that Diane might access. She said, plainly, that the home was meant to be divided equally between her daughters. The room was silent when it ended. Dad sat with his hands flat on the dresser. Mr. Briggs placed the forged document next to the original for comparison. Dad looked at it for a long time. Then he looked up. "Did you do this?" he asked. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't dramatic. His voice was quiet and old and broken in a way I hadn't heard before. Diane started crying. She said she had done everything. She had given up years of her life. No one appreciated what she had sacrificed. The words came fast, rehearsed sounding, like she had planned for a version of this moment. But no one in that room was looking at her the same way anymore. The real estate listing was frozen. With the probate review filed, Diane could not sell or claim the property on her own. The document she had forged was now part of a formal legal record. And I found her in the hallway before I left. I kept my voice low. "I didn't do this to hurt you," I said. "I did it because Mom asked me to protect what she built. You just forgot I was listening." She didn't respond. I picked up my coat and walked out through the front door. In the weeks after Christmas, the estate entered formal probate review. The house was legally protected. The forged reimbursement claim was flagged by the court for further investigation. Diane's husband retained his own attorney shortly after. I heard through my aunt that he hadn't known about the $14,000 claim. The marriage began to show visible cracks. The family had learned she'd kept that from him, too. Dad called and asked if I would have lunch with him. Just the 2 of us. It was the first time in years he had asked for that. He didn't make a speech. And he just said, "I should have seen it. I think I just wanted things to be easier than they were." He stirred his coffee and looked out the window. I didn't fill the silence with reassurance. I just let it sit there, the way honest things sometimes need to. I didn't burn anything down. I didn't need to. The truth had done what anger never could. I went back to my patients, my small apartment, my quiet mornings. But something had shifted in me that I couldn't fully explain. I had spent so many years making myself smaller so that rooms felt more comfortable for people who needed to feel bigger than me. I was done with that. My mother didn't leave me a house. She left me her trust. Turns out, that was worth more than anything Diane ever tried to take. But if someone in your family has ever called you a burden while they were the one taking everything, this story is for you, not the version of you that doubts yourself at 2 a.m. The version of you that quietly kept every text, remembered every conversation, and waited for the right moment. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And drop your story in the comments. You'd be surprised how many people are living the same chapter right now. Click like to help this story reach the people who need it most. Every week, I share stories about the moments that test us, the ones that make us question whether we're too much or not enough. If Tessa's story stayed with you, subscribe so you never miss the next one. And before you go, tell me one thing. What's the moment you stopped letting someone else define your worth? I read every comment. I'll see you there.